I don't need to introduce most of the panelists here, except for Jay Lowell, who is the chief scientist for Boeing Distributed Computing and Networking. He'll be here to offer a perspective from the DoD industry that's not otherwise represented here. So we have a very nice variety of perspectives. So what we're going to do here, we'll go about 40 minutes and around 5:45. And I'm going to start with a couple starter questions that I want to ask the panel. Then I'm going to try to turn it over to audience questions. In the interest of time, we have a large panel, so not everybody needs to answer every question. I'm going to pose a question, ask for volunteers to answer it. You are welcome to answer any question, but don't feel obligated if you don't have a unique perspective you want to offer. And I'll try to keep each question to 8 minutes at the most so we can get a variety. All right. So the first thing I wanted to know, just to kind of bring this whole section together, is we heard a very nice set of talks earlier from what we call the supply side of the workforce, the universities and training programs. And the first thing I wanted to hear is just your general comments on what you heard there. In particular, have you tried to recruit from people in any of those programs? I know it's a little bit early, but have you found anything in particular in what they're doing is prone to work or not work? And was there anything that kind of resonated with you that you thought was interesting as far as from a recruiting point of view? Go ahead.
I can start. So we recruit from School of Mines all the time. They're just down the street from us. We like physicists, but we like physicists with sort of an engineering bent, and School of Mines is very good at that. They also they work their students very hard, and so those folks have great work ethics. They've got a lot of grit, which we appreciate. I was very interested to see a focus on undergraduate and masters. That echoes with a lot of what we're doing, and so we do feel a need for that. Somewhat, we're not a very large company. I think we got 5 staff scientists. Typically, when we go to hire a PhD, it's not too hard finding a qualified applicant, but hiring bachelors and masters, that's much harder for us. And then hiring even lower than that is hard as well. So a lot of it echoed with me.
Yep. Go ahead, Mark.
Is this on? Yeah, it is. Yeah. I actually wasn't aware of some of those programs. So this is a very helpful session for us. And per the comment just made, I think in the last 2 speakers, only about 20% of our company has PhDs. And that has evolved along the lines that you were talking about, where, initially it was a much higher fraction, but then as we got into it, we realized, no, that's not really necessary. And none of these PhDs actually, in our case, had expertise in the area that we were developing in. So we were going to have to train them anyway. And it's much more effective to hire younger. The other point I think I wanted to touch on, I was happy to see the attention to the broader person, what I think somebody referred to as the soft skills, but ability to work in a team, approach to that around, okay, maybe research projects are a way to develop that. I was really encouraged to see that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Pretty?
So I guess I'm kind of speaking from the perspective of startups. They don't have a pathway through which they hire people who've gone through these programs, for example. They usually hire people who are trained, who were working with them. But I heard some interesting perspectives when I was talking to some of my startups. One of them was like, oh, sometimes we hire people who don't quite understand what this is, but there's so many courses on the web. Like Umesh has a course on the web. We let them do that. Jeffrey Hinton has a course on the web, and those are really great. We send them off to look at YouTube for a week, and they come back and they're ready to work for us. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. Jay, were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say, as somebody who wasn't up and giving a talk here, we've worked with CQE, and I've actually tried to hire people from mines and people from other places that were represented in the earlier panels, and we have employees certainly within the company from those schools and those but not through those programs as of yet. We have sent people to some of the training programs. Some of our we haven't sent them to CQE yet. We got hit by COVID at the same time they did, and that shut down our ability to go do that. But what I've had to do in the interim is actually kind of work within and hire from within the company. So while I've been fueling our growth, my growth within my organization, which has gone from basically gone from about 10 people to about 50 people, rough numbers. 50% of that growth, more than 50% of that growth has been within the company. And at 50 people, I have 7 PhDs. So even within a large company, those fractions and those numbers, it's not necessary to have everybody with that degree. It's about strategically deploying them where they're needed and supplementing their generalist skill sets, their breadth and depth in a particular area with the right supporting people around them. And so for that, we've been pulling from very broad areas of the company. And I wanted to, if I have time, one more thing I wanted to talk about, and that is one of the things we have set up at Boeing that I'm very fortunate to be able to use is we have a early career rotation program with our engineers. It's a unique program that the company has set up. We take and select about 65 to 70 engineers from throughout the company within their first 3 years of being hired, right? Mind you, this is out of an 80,000 person workforce. So it gives you a sense of scale, right? It's very selected, highly selective group. They go through 4 successive 6-month rotations in different parts of the company. Each rotation has to deal with a different business, a different part of the life cycle of the products that we build, a different technical area often. And we've actually, I've had 6 of those rotation people come through. Not a single one had a degree in physics or electrical engineering. I had 5 aero engineers and a computer scientist, and they have been some of the most productive employees I've had on my team. So it's not about getting people trained in the specifics. It's about finding the way to match the skills that they have with the skills that you need to get the job done. So, and thanks for the earlier panel for really highlighting that aspect of the training as well.
Yeah, thanks for that perspective.
I just wanted to add, from the startup perspective, and especially early stage startups, they have limited resources that cannot really hire people at this stage. There's one of our startups, one guy really, and he has a team of collaborators outside of the country, but he is just by himself here in States. In his case, we connected him with a business school at the University of Maryland. We have a good relationship with a professor of entrepreneurship. And a couple of things happened. Number one is a team of consultants was assembled for his company, and they just worked on a case for their MBA program. I think the presentation is actually tomorrow, the final presentation. And he is progressing, and he's going to hire one of those students for a little consulting gig to help with business planning, with marketing, and other skills that he doesn't have. He is PhD in physics. Another thing we recently were looking at the University of Maryland is there's an undergrad who started a undergrad quantum association. So she gathered a bunch of students interested in quantum. And we just talked to her 2 weeks ago. And one of the ideas we have is to create internship programs through Quantum Startup Foundry, whether with us or for our startups, to provide some mutual benefits to the startups and to undergrads to sort of expose them to real world.
Anybody else would like to add anything? All right. So what I'd like to ask next is just to give you an opportunity to talk about what are the characteristics of people you need to hire that are most difficult to find or that are giving you the most trouble. And feel free to be specific. We have a nice spectrum of companies here, so feel free to talk about your particular situation.
I think, and I speak from my broader experience just outside of Quantum Startup Founder, but I think the hardest skill to find is problem-solving skills. I think you can teach people a lot of things, but if they don't have a knack for and passion to attack a problem and solve the problem, you can't really teach that.
So I know that one of the skills we really value at Cubatech is, first off, I think everybody in the quantum space, I hate to say this, we don't exactly know what we're doing, right? You know, we're kind of learning as we go. So it's nice to have someone that can say that, right? An electrical engineer or especially a physicist that can say, I'm not really sure what's happening here. And it's going to take me a while to figure this out. We're going to have to work through it together and not try and hide, any ignorance. It's really a key skill, and it's not very commonly found, unfortunately.
I think at a small company and a technical company, we're very interested in engineers, but you also need somebody that's willing to step outside their comfort zone and address other things. So there's an aspect of teamwork, and there's just this aspect of being willing to kind of roll up your sleeves and do whatever needs to be done, because we don't have a lot of people who don't have a lot of resources necessarily. And so everybody might have to do a lot of stuff. And that just that breadth of skills and the willingness to do that is, I think, important.
I think the thing that I've been most successful in highlighting in the hiring process is I screen for people who've demonstrated the ability to learn something completely new. In fact, that's why this engineering rotation program has been so successful, because those people, we're essentially forcing them in the position of learning a completely new job and rotating through that. Part of it comes from, my background is in the military, and in the military, one of the ideas is you rotate through your positions because you need the redundancy of having people understand how to do many kinds of jobs. The corollary to that is you need people who can pick up and learn the thing when you get to the place where you haven't figured out what to do or haven't done it before. They can learn it faster than the next guy. And that's what I'm screening for in these, I'd say kids, they're these young employees, right? They're 2 and 3 and 4 years out of college, and yet they've demonstrated the ability to stop, pick up, learn something completely new, master it, contribute, stop, pick up, learn something new, master it, and contribute again and again and again. If I find a team of people like that, I can, move walls.
I agree with everything these other folks said. Another thing I always look for is what I sometimes refer to as ownership. And so, that might be pride or giving a damn. That means if you screw something up, you own that mistake. Everyone screws up. We've got a culture that's okay. You own up to it. And then we figure out collectively how to fix it and not do that again. But if you've got a deadline, you got a project, someone who says, I'm going to take my personal pride to make sure that this happens and that this goes out the door and it's something I'm proud of. That can be hard to find sometimes.
Actually, those are all really resonate. Most of those points you were making on the learning new things. It was just one example. I touched on the superconducting IC designer. So we do VLSI scale design with Josephson and junction circuits and then fabricate them. And we long ago gave up on the idea of being able to hire an academically trained people in that area. But we've identified some areas in electrical engineering that have enough overlap and lend themselves to it. And then part of that was we designed a recruiting process or an interview process that was aimed at testing ability to and then willingness to try and learn something new. The willingness is interesting because you have to basically make yourself vulnerable to being able to say, I don't know. You were an expert in your field and you've been that way for a few years. Can you go back to being just like a novice? And to be able to look for that when you're hiring was important. I will also call out sort of project managers. We have some really outstanding ones. I don't know how I'm going to hire anymore. I don't know where to find them. that somebody that can really and not just make Gantt charts, but understand how to go and work with people on their own terms and get them motivated.
Talk about soft skills.
Get them to be able to be comfortable with signing up to how long do you really think that's going to take, and there's just a whole bunch of that really requires a great deal of EQ, but also being able to understand enough about the technology so that they can treat with the experts on their own terms. The last one I want to mention, though, gets back to something I mentioned early in my presentation, was in terms of skills and how do we hire for this, people that understand enough about classical algorithms and quantum algorithms, and then have the problem solving ability that can basically work with domain experts and with customers and potential customers about and understand their problems and help them connect it to quantum solutions. That's something I don't think you could really have too many folks like that, and there are very, very few around.
So I think everything that people before me have said is true for startups as well. I think startups in this space also have another unique problem in that often they're hiring people who are fresh out of research labs. And when you're a graduate student, you sometimes have the luxury of working at a problem. You can keep working at a problem, going down a rabbit hole. Generally, you can keep doing that for a while. But in a startup, that's like the opposite of what you need to do. And trying to get a fresh PhD to stop, like, I really can solve this. I really, really can. I just need one more day. And trying to get them out of that, like, that's really hard. And I've heard many startups say, like, the worst hire they did was like some PhD, like the smartest PhD out of a lab that they hired, because they just would not stop working on something in a certain way. Sorry. And then another thing I've heard consistently is as startups grow, they're looking to add business talent. And especially in this space, they're looking to add business talent that understands the space. And that's hard. Like, it's not easy to come by. And they're always looking for that type of help. Like, how do I know how to get in the photonics industry, and finding the right CEO to do that.
Thank you. I'd like to invite anybody in the audience who would like to ask a question.
I just have a comment. It seems like the metric of a small company that has made it has. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me? I think what I heard is that the metric of a good, successful small business in this area is that when they have reduced the PhD to non-PhD ratio to 20%. So that's a good metric. But I have another comment on the other side, which is that I think every PhD has the responsibility to create 4 jobs. And if you can do that one, then the ratio is going to go down to 20%. That's the way to look at your own degree.
My VP of technology, who heads the whole engineering and R&D group, he says he is successful if he's growing the manufacturing staff. That's how he thinks about it, which I agree.
I got one.
Yep, go ahead, Daryl.
So looking at quantum computing report, and we do some work on collecting jobs data. That's what we do. And so almost all of you are on our radar. Anyway, the data is showing, at least in my database, around 85 to 110, maybe 115 job turnovers per week globally in the quantum space, defined very widely. So those jobs postings and listings on your websites and the various search job sites, those jobs are rolling off at that rate, roughly. And the question I have is, if you're having trouble finding people, are any of you ever capitulating and say, okay, I can't find somebody for that job, so I'm going to remove that from my website or remove it from Indeed or wherever the case may be? Or is this data indicating that, it may take a while and you've got some inventory to fill in jobs, but, is anybody capitulating and say, I can't find somebody, so I give up and I'm going to pull the job posting?
I have.
What's that look like? Yeah.
Painful. It happens. It happens in particular when. So I have a few positions that are highly specialized that I know the applicant pool that I need for the skill sets that I need is very small and not likely to be interested in moving from the position that they're in. So I've had one job like that we've been searching now for 9 months, and we haven't found anyone. Now, I have to pull the requisition after a certain amount of time. So we've pulled and reposted, pulled and reworked now twice. We're probably looking at a third time here coming up in the next month or two if we don't make traction on it. That's one. And I have 2 jobs like that are out there. But they have very special requirements attached to them that make them a very small applicant pool. So I know that's going to be a problem job. We've posted that job long before we need it. We knew it was going to be hard, but that doesn't, I have to eventually give up just trying the same thing. So now we're trying to figure out how do we go about this a different way. And that's really the depressing part of this is you've spent all this time going after it. But there's it's a sunk cost, right? I need to give up on that sunk cost and I need to think about the actual return that I need and change my approach. So that's the part that's really difficult is admitting that to yourself, that you've sunk all this effort into a losing approach and you need to change. No, they are not consultants, and I'm not really at liberty to say what they are, but if you look on our job posting sites, you might be able to figure that out.
I might make a comment that a little bit echoes that. We've had a couple of examples of this, and to just you're asking what does that look like? In 2 cases I'm thinking of. One was, for example, a cryogenic engineer. We initially envisioned it as a senior role, and that it would be this person would be then multiply their force out through say more junior folks and be able to start up a larger group. And the capitulation was basically a reassessment of like, okay, we need to take another approach at solving this problem. Let's start off with somebody who's junior and maybe with even less differentiated skills, and then we're going to do the training there, and then we'll solve the sort of the bridging the technology.
You're exactly at the point we're at. We're trying to figure out if one job is 4.
Right. And sometimes that's how you have to do it, right? You have to say, okay, we'll break this up into smaller pieces. And
it helps, but it hurts us, right? So I'd rather be able to find one person to do the right job the right way. But if I have to bend, I have to bend.
Maybe you've solved the problem. You've created 4 jobs.
Maybe.
Bottom line, we just see the job posting disappear. We don't have any.
You guys don't care.
What's the scoop?
But trust me, it's a battle inside.
We have a very hard time hiring software people. We do embedded software, GUIs, things like that, and those folks are just incredibly sought after. And so we were looking for someone who had some experience. We just could not. We found someone we loved, and then they got offered an insane salary. And oh my God! And so we ended up having an intern that then turned into a job. So we got the intern. The intern loved working there. He loved doing all the crazy stuff we're doing, and then he turned into a permanent hire. And so that worked out. We're thinking of doing the same thing. We're looking for a junior level EE, someone who can do board layouts, things like that. We're having a hard time firing that person, but we have a couple of intern candidates. So maybe we'll go that route.
Add clearance requirements to that.
I can't even imagine. Yeah.
So Scott, let me just actually follow up on that then. So to what extent is salary the issue? Because you talk about PhD, masters, you go down the line, oftentimes the lower people get paid less and they just don't want to do that kind of work for that money.
Right.
Like I'm just wondering to what extent is it salary compensation? We see this also just universally the last 2 years or last year where salary has been a much bigger driver for people changing jobs. So I'm just kind of curious.
We have the salary discussion early with applicants because if their goal is to get the highest paycheck possible, they're going to go work for Google. Google's got a big campus and they're always hiring, or they're going to go work for, I don't know, is Honeywell or Quantinuum here? They're going to go work for them. So it's got to be a cultural fit. We try to balance it out. So in terms of I try hard, I don't think R&D, engineering, manufacturing, they're all legs of the stool. They're all equally important. So that person that just has the high school degree that is production manager, they're one of the highest paid people in the company. And it's a meritocracy. It's how much value you add to the organization. And that's what the compensation is for. There are expectations, of course, if you're hiring a PhD. And so you have to hit those. You can't be too outside of the market. And we have seen salary pressure, and luckily the company's been growing, so we can sort of keep the talent. But it is, and I'd be curious, I imagine Duncan's in a similar spot, like where you want to work in a small, exciting environment. If salary is your primary driver, that's probably not the best spot for you.
So we're both small businesses. There are different kinds of small businesses, right? There's the small business that's selling product, doing R&D grants, and being profitable, and you're growing that way. And then there's small businesses that have VC investment and a lot of money in the bank. So hiring somebody is really critical if you're with a small business that you're paying your own payroll. You can't really have a bad hire. That can be a real disaster. But also, you can't pay them what the other guys would pay. So you've got to try and get creative, find the right fit. Usually that means you've got to have a good network. Putting something on the web is something we've done as well. Job postings on the web. They really rarely work for at least for us. We get some candidates. Most of them aren't qualified. And then the ones that are, it just doesn't seem like a good fit. Or we can't, meet their salary requirements. So using consultants, transitioning them in, using our network, going out to the universities, our partners, and bringing in their recent graduates. That's kind of most of the ways it comes in, and you never see those job postings. It's just sort of all behind the scenes. So the numbers you gave, I would think, are probably smaller than what's really out there in that turnover. It'd be good to know what that real number is.
Can I ask a question of the rest of the people on the panel? So one of the things we've also seen with regard, it's not just salary. One of the things we've seen is the offer for essentially people to have virtual work options that basically open them up to markets that are outside their current location. So we've had people poached from one site, right? We have 6 sites. I have people working for me in 6 different states. On my projects, but I've had people from one site poached from people in another location that's not where they are. So they've been pulled into a virtual environment. Have you guys seen that kind of pressure as well, where it's not just the salary, but also the opening up of new job options that essentially exposes them to different markets?
So that for us is differentiated a bit on what they're doing. So in the software area and folks with software disciplines, that has happened. With the physical technology, a lot less so, because we really have sort of collectively said work is here. We work with the physical technology that has a place, and we have to treat with it on that. And then once you have that, it's culturally, I think, much better to say everybody's going to come in. So we don't have a sort of build up a class society where you have the folks that have to come in and the folks that are working remotely. And so far that's worked out with the folks that are working on the physical or even related to the physical technology, whether or not they need to come in. For sure, for software folks, that's happened.
What about the startups environments? Are you guys seeing pull from other locations?
So I would say we're the pool. I mean, we in general, when we're looking for employees, we're willing to be flexible. So if they want to leave and work remotely, we'll do it. And for something like a PCB layout or something like that, it's okay if it's remote. Unfortunately, there are some jobs that you do have to physically be there. And that's a little more challenging. The bigger issue we're running into is you've got somebody that used to be physically, in our case, in San Diego, then they're remote, then they would like to be remote somewhere other than San Diego, and no one wants to see their pay decreased, and so it feels like a demotion. So that's the next challenge. How do you keep your people from sort of migrating out as they become remote? It's something we're just kind of planning for, but I think it's going to happen. It's probably inevitable.
It's a fault of compensation. Do you not feel that when we talk about the labor shortage, we can't find a lot of people? Is it we can't find a lot of people, or we don't pay good people enough to come in and quantum? In other words, because there's other more lucrative jobs, those talented people exist. It's just quantum isn't compensating.
Can I comment on that? There are other reasons to work than to get paid a lot. And no. And I don't mean that to be. I don't mean to. But I'm going to make a point though. And somebody else touched on this about fit. That it is that there are people that will say, okay, I would rather go work here because I'm going to earn 50% more. Okay, totally fair. No, but so I think it's important. So, for example, to have a positive workplace, to have a place that people enjoy working with, to have a vision that people can have passion about, and to focus on that. I think you're always going to lose people. There are always going to be some people that will chase the big dollars. But somebody had a plot of the Valley of Death there, and I think any of us that are in that are not going to be offering huge salaries.
Yeah, I'm sure their workforce development say, well, we need to develop more people. It's like, well, the people are there, we're just not in a position to pay them, or is it really? So I just always just kind of curious.
Yeah. So Corey, I think about that all the time. There were we had 2 job openings. There were 2 applicants that I really wanted. I was very excited about them, and we lost both of them because they got substantially higher pay offers somewhere else. And I couldn't begrudge them that. It's like, oh my God, that's a 30% bump over what we can pay. But then the other side is, I don't know. So I keep thinking about that all the time. We got to get our pay rates up, and we got to somehow keep the business afloat while we're doing it, and all of that. But it's, the other side is, in some sense, that's a bit of a litmus test. Maybe that wasn't a great fit. If they are going to be a mindset of always chasing top dollar, probably we've got really good retention. We lose almost nobody. And so I think, yeah.
So we've seen the problem of having good people who get lured away to go work other places at higher salaries that we can try to match, but just can't do it. We've actually, and this is not just in this quantum space, it's a broader issue that we're seeing within our company writ large, particularly in electrical and software engineering. And as a company, we've actually gone through just recently at a company our size and reworked essentially the incentive packages that we're willing to go down for some of these critical, what we call critical retention skills, that we need to ensure that we are not only retaining the people that we have, but bringing in and augmenting those people because we're understaffed at the company level in those fields. So the pull is there, whether they're in the quantum field or not, but there is also the problem that there simply are not enough people in the quantum space. So it is not an either or, it is an and. It is a both. Conditions exist.
In the federal government, we have the exact same problem where people can pay higher salaries than we can, and we lose talented people all the time, which is good. We should be seeing.
Right, we're looking to hire them from you guys.
Exactly, but at the same time, we do need it.
Yeah, go ahead.
A question about mid-career people versus new college grads. Do you have any preference for one over the other, or perhaps a targeted mix? And also for the mid-career people, do you think that there are adequate training programs like University of Chicago has one, but should there be more to train these mid-career people?
So I'll jump up and answer if no one else wants to. I'm never shy. So I'd say right now my teams are, over the 50 people I have, I'm probably about a 60-40 mix mid-career to early career. And that's about where I want to be for the next few years. But most of my growth beyond this point is going to start coming in the younger areas. There's only, I'm a little top heavy right now because we're kind of building up our capabilities to get to a stable point. The hiring and building that number of mid-career people to come in and work took really there were three strategies we employed. The first was going out throughout our company, our 80,000 engineers, and hand selecting those people with the background that we needed, and then convincing them to give up working on what they were and come work on what we needed them to work on. Right? That took months, but it was worth it because it seeded the islands that we needed to grow around with those experienced mid-career people who had not just relevant quantum experience, but experience in other parts of the jobs that they do in the company, whether it's electrical engineering, whether it's system engineering, whether it's product design, testing, whatever. We augmented with hires beyond that, targeting a few key mid-career hires. We've hired more mid-career than early career because we want to bring in those different perspectives and those people who don't know the Boeing way of doing things to help diversify the engineering approaches that we're using. The technology is relatively new and had not been used widely within our company, and we needed that diversity to be successful. And then a lot of the junior engineers, we've really used programs like this rotation program to pull those people in and build rapidly from that younger career set. And it's been a successful strategy for us to grow, again, predominantly on internal growth and use that to build functioning teams that really work well together and work well for the purpose that they're trying to, the project and purpose that they're trying to do.
We went through a process that I think maybe a lot of early companies go through. When we started out, we were hiring young talent because they were cheaper and we could afford them. I still hire young talent. I like young talent. I like the energy. I like the flexibility. I like that they're willing to try new things. But we reached a point where, we're designing. And so our first products, some of that we still sell, they're not designed for manufacturing. They're kind of a nightmare. We still make them. It's like, we got to bring in someone that actually knows how to do this. And that's going to cost money. And so we had to do it. And same thing with program managers, same thing with finance, same thing with sales. They pay off. And so we brought in a sales guy. He's a PhD from Berkeley. And it's like, oh my God, we can't afford this guy. Our sales jumped 50% in the second half of the year right after we brought him in. And it was like, oh my God, that was a lesson. And so we've learned that. So it's a mix. It's, your ratio is probably about right. 50-50 or.
We didn't answer the training question, but I think that there are many ways to skin that cat. Training programs like that are one of them. Selection's another one. We've been successful so far. I think that there's enough available for me, for my needs, for the foreseeable, for the next couple of years. But I'm one company, right? If you multiply that by 100, I think those needs, or by 20, those needs may be inadequate.
So I had a follow-up that related to that and also related to everyone's earlier questions about what you're looking for. It was all about problem solving, adaptability, demonstrated adaptability, right? Which is really unrelated largely to the training that the universities can provide. So I guess I would like to hear, are there specific things you're really looking for from them to supplement what you're already doing with these more mid-career rotation type strategies?
And again, to be specific, I'll probably only need a handful of people to go through that kind of mid-career training because that's the ratio that I want to have going forward. So the size of the training program that they have is about right for what I see needing. And it's the right kind of things that I need to augment the experience that they're already going to have to rapidly assimilate them into an environment where they're unfamiliar. So I applaud what they've done to structure these programs. It's just, I don't need it 85% of the time or 90% of the time. It's 10% of my people or even less that's applicable to. But for them, it's just right.
Any others have comments on that?
So for small businesses, essentially what we're trying to do every day is bring order to chaos, right? I mean, it's just mad. It's like a madhouse. And so the mid-career people are really good at bringing the order, right? Because they come in, they've got experience. They're also extremely hard to get. There's so much competition for them. But they do play a role, but they don't do the day-to-day. So you need a mix of both. for sure. But if you imagine an electrical engineer straight out of college, if you're bringing him in, you don't have somebody to mentor him. If he hasn't worked in a professional environment before, he just adds to the chaos. So it's no offense to him, but it really does. We really do need that mix. Just real quick to what Corey was saying, that we are struggling to get those mid-career people though to join at least the small businesses. That they're smart guys. They've got families and they're planning for sort of their larger professional career. And making a jump to quantum right now, they've got their finger in the wind and checking which way the wind blows, and they're not quite sure that that's a smart jump, and so they're holding back. I hope that changes in the next year or two. But right now it's a lot of work to entice those guys into these small businesses.
I guess I've got a question for the bigger companies. Let's say you're trying to develop a new product line. Do you look for the younger professionals to come in, and do ideas come from them, or is it the mid-career? Like, how does that happen?
It's not an either or. They come from everywhere, right? I'm sorry, I'm doing all the talking. I feel like, but the best team is one that has got both. It's got to have a mix in every possible way you can think about it. A mix of age, a mix of background, a mix of disciplines. If you bring that team together for a product development, you're going to get the best product because they're going to challenge each other's assumptions. They're going to keep each other honest, and they're going to likely come up with collectively, they're going to see the thing that a homogenous team is just going to look right past. That team is always going to be more successful than a team that has 5 cookie cutter employees who do things by the same process, were trained the same way, came out of the same lab. That's why I try not to hire people from the same school twice in a row. So,
yeah, it can be a mistake to hire a replicant of yourself. You already have yourself. You see that in startup companies all the time. They want to hire someone who came out of the same lab they came out of. You want to bring a diversity. For new product, every year we do this exercise where we do our technology and product road mapping. It's actually coming up this Friday. And we bring in sales and marketing, we bring in R&D, we bring in manufacturing. And we say, first we look at how we did last year, what new products did we get out? And then we look at, okay, where is our product portfolio weak? What do we want to get out next year? And then we look at from the development side, what's going to be our NPI in the next 12 months, but then also what's further looking? What's the direction we want to go in? And we tag that into, so we offset a lot of our development costs with government dollars. And so, or customer funded NRE. And we think, well, does this have legs? Can we get this paid for through a government program? And then we say, okay, and if it can, is there a product at the end of the day? So if there's no product at the end of the day, we don't do it, even if the government's paying for it. And it's hard. It's a little bit of crystal ball gazing. It's a little bit of, there are things that we know are going to sell and sort of be incremental. There are things that are bigger steps for us and going to take longer. We've got an IRAD budget, and so we're sort of precious and careful with that. Government dollars were a little, we can try something crazier if the government's helping pay for it.
So I hate to cut this off, but at this point, I would like to say thank all of you for sticking with us to the bitter end. I'd like to thank all the panelists for sharing their perspectives on this really important problem. And also, thank you to Adrian and the entire team in organizing this entire session. It's been, I really enjoyed it.